This episode of the Untethered MMA podcast is sponsored by MMAmount.com. MMA Mount provides the latest news, interviews, and more from the MMA world. Follow MMA Mount on Twitter at MMA Mount and like MMA Mount on Facebook.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Untethered MMA podcast. I am your host, Mike Fagan. With me this week is Derek Suboticki. Mr. Matt Roth is out. He's back home in New Jersey covering the UFC on Fox coming up this weekend. If you want to reach the show, you can call us 410-988-6525. You can reach us on Twitter, me at It's Mike Fagan, Derek at FightLinker Subo, and if you still want to get in contact with Matt Roth, at MattRoth512. Derek, I just want to lead off with some interesting news I heard about yourself. You're going to be competing in a jiu-jitsu tournament coming up.
And not of my own volition, which is one of the better parts. A buddy of mine had his first amateur fight in January, and he's been training for years and always made fun of me as the guy that wrote about it but didn't do it. So saw him fight, signed up for 6 months up at Easton in Denver. I'm 3 months in. And I get over to his place on Monday to crash to wake up to go to the job in Denver that I don't have anymore. And he says, "How's your cardio?" And I say, "It sucks." And he says, "Well, I paid your entry fee to the tournament next month and signed you up, so you better fucking get on it." So I have, I believe it's June 9th. I'm screwed. That's what's going to happen. But he did it to it 6 months, and he gassed like hell, and then went out for his second one and got sub. And he said it was a good learning experience for him. So, at worst, you learn where you are relative to other noobs. So I'll be just against white belts, but we'll see, man. We'll see.
The question I have for you is, do you know what weight class you're going to compete in? Are you going to have to cut any weight, or are you going to compete just naturally kind of where you're at?
Yeah, that was the first question I asked him. I said, what are the classes? And they have one that goes 170 to 184 and then 185 to 204. I stepped on a scale and I'm about 207 right now, which is kind of weird because I started jiu-jitsu at about 200, so it's actually put on a little bit of muscle. So I thought about just trying to Superman it out and maybe try like a trial cut and see if I could just be a monster at 184, but I think I'm going to try to be comfy and just come in at 204 and, hopefully there aren't any white belts that are fucking former wrestlers that are come in at like 220.
Well, there's two issues with that. The first is, do you have to weigh with the gi on or just weigh with just your normal clothes on?
That's not a bad question. I don't know, but walking on a scale and being 207, I think I can, sit in a sauna and probably get down to like 202, and then it doesn't really matter.
Because the gi puts on, depending on your gi, between 3 and 5 pounds. But the other issue is whether it's a same day weigh-in or a day before weigh-in. Because if you're weighing in on the same day, I would highly suggest you don't try to cut down to 184 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think it is the day before. I think they have weigh-ins the day before, so that's nice. I can kind of go ahead and sweat a little bit if I need to in order to get down to it. I don't want to come in at 195 or something and have, I like being big. It's the only advantage I have when I fucking am in practice. So,
yeah, I competed. I've only competed once. It was 2 years ago this August. And I at the time I was walking around at like 150, between 155 and 160, and the weight classes were like 165, and then the one below it was 149 or 150. But you had to weigh in with your gi on, and I decided that I didn't want to try to mess around with guys that are heavier than me and put weight on, so I cut down. And it was one of the most miserable things I've ever had to do. I just lost weight throughout the month that I was leading up to it. And I made the big mistake of not eating or not planning on eating the day before. I ate a little bit. I had some celery. The problem was I was right about on weight, and then I went to the tournament, and it's in this gym that didn't really have air conditioning on, and just sitting in the gym for a couple hours and being nervous and kind of finicky and stuff. I lost 2 or 3 pounds just sitting in the gym. So I came in like 2 or 3 pounds underweight and was just really just didn't have energy, which sucked because um, even in practice during that week, even though I had lost 5 to 10 pounds from my walking around weight, I still felt really good. But the day of, I just kind of killed myself. But I do.
Well, you're not a very big guy anyway.
I'm not a very big guy anyway. I actually weigh. I've been weighing myself the last couple of weeks because I've been. I haven't been going to the gym as much as I'd like, and I'm actually walking around at like 170, 175 right now, which is big for me. Yeah,
chubs.
It's that skinny fat thing. But I do have some news myself. I got my blue belt on Sunday.
Hey, congratulations!
I'm officially blue belt.
How long did that take you?
Well, I've been on and off training. I started almost 4 years ago now, maybe 4.5. But there was a long period.
But like twice a week, couple times, like 2-3 times.
2-3 times a week. Yeah, for the most part. I'd say about 2 years, 2.5 years of doing that.
There you go. All right, well done.
The funny thing about it is that it was a seminar. My jiu-jitsu coach, his mentor, his coach above him, was coming into town to do a seminar. And I told Jeff, my instructor, like, hey, planning on going. But the thing is that about a month ago, Kyle Watson came in to do a seminar, and I paid Jeff money, and I was all ready to go. And then Friday night before the seminar, which was on Sunday, the Friday night before, I got like way drunk, way super drunk. So Saturday was a waste. And something in my brain, the alcohol must have killed the information about this seminar. So on Sunday shows up, I don't go. I come into class on Monday, and I look at the board, and I'm like, oh, shit, I kind of missed that seminar, didn't I? So Jeff, on Sunday before this seminar, texted me. He's like, hey, remember there's a seminar today. And I kind of laughed it off. And then when we got there, I started hearing him and Jack, his coach, talk about promotions. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't think he was just reminding me to be funny. And then I got my blue belt, and kind of came by surprise, but it actually motivates me more to go into the gym because now I feel like I want to live up to it and earn it. So that's my news.
Smoked by some white belts that have actually been.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is, I'm still one of the smaller guys in the gym, so I still get beat on pretty heavily by a lot of guys there.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest guy there. There's this one guy we got there who has a government job that I won't disclose here, but he goes about 240. We call him the gentle heavyweight. But when he gets tired and he wants to just fucking throw you, that's what he does. So I'm not going to have that advantage at the 204 weight class. I'd like to, when I was moving big bags and shit and everything for either the mattress job or the feed store job I had, I was probably walking around about $185. That'd probably be the optimal weight for me.
Yeah, and one thing I'd recommend for you too is, and it's really difficult, especially your first time competing, but try to get as relaxed as possible. I know Marcelo Garcia actually takes a nap before his matches, and he just kind of wakes up, and because
he ain't fucking worried about it. That's
oh yeah,
if I was Marcelo Garcia, I'd be pretty confident too.
I mean, it's something that he's done for a long time, though. I mean, it's just the idea of like, if you've got like a tablet or a book to read, like. I actually wouldn't pay attention to the mats at all. Just try to get it out of your head and just kind of hang out. But I think inevitably you're going to get nervous once you step on the mat. Because I remember when I competed, I was on the mat for maybe 2.5 minutes, and it felt like 10 seconds. And the only thing I remember is the tunnel vision of me and my opponent, and then I could hear my coach yelling instructions at me, and that's the only thing I can remember about those 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to definitely try to be a robot and do exactly what my coach says, because then if something goes wrong, I can just blame him. Be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and don't try to do anything. Don't try to do anything that you don't know that well.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have your game, whatever your game is, just do that. If it works, it works. If it doesn't.
I really need to learn, I learned a half guard sweep called the old school. I need more sweeps from the bottom. I can hold side control decently. I know how to distribute my weight, but from the bottom, I need to learn how to get out from the bottom as opposed to just recovering guard. Any kind of solicitation from Twitter, anybody that's been doing jiu-jitsu for a while, I already reached out to Patrick Tenney at one of the few people that I still like at Bloody Elbow, and he gave me some good advice. So, just gonna we're going to see what happens, and there's probably going to be some more embarrassing internet video of me to go along with me drinking piss. It'll just be me gassing after like a minute.
Yeah, and we'll get that 3 or 4 or 5 weeks after it actually happens. So keep on the lookout for that.
Oh no, I posted the piss video. I didn't like have the piss video and then just sit on it for a while. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing the JITS tournament next month, so that's probably when the video.
Well, let's hope. But let's move on. Let's get into some actual MMA. I got a pretty. I wouldn't call big by the standards of what's on the show, but it is on Fox, so it is by nature a big show. The UFC on Fox. It's the 3rd iteration of it. It's an interesting show because it's taking a different direction than what they've done in the first couple of shows. I mean, and technically the Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos was kind of a one-off special thing. The interesting thing about this show, I think, is that there isn't really a big draw on the main card in terms of name value. Nate Diaz and Jim Miller are going to be headlining, and then you've got Josh Koscheck and Johnny Hendricks in the co-main, Husamar Palares, Alan Belcher, and Pat Barry, LeVar Johnson round out the card that'll be on Big Fox. It's a good card. I think it's an entertaining card. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of viewership they get, because I don't think this is something that's going to excite people.
Well, you know, the viewership is a question, but there are very few names that are currently available, even if you look at the champions. I mean, if you put Anderson Silva on Fox, he's not going to draw a substantial amount of casual viewers because casual viewers don't know who Anderson Silva is. I mean, you had that with Brock Lesnar, but he's gone now. So if you look at I look at this card being mainly geared, at least the main card, towards pleasing the people that do turn in. If you happen to be flipping the channels and you come in early, you get to see heavyweights banging against each other. Then after that, you have excellent Muay Thai Alan Belcher against crazy cartoon-looking character Husamar Palares, who just dives on people's legs and destroys them. Then you have, Koscheck versus Hendricks, which might be a little bit boring, but you have wrestlers in there. And then Diaz Miller, which is almost guaranteed to be entertaining. It's more towards rewarding the viewers as opposed to drawing them in, I think.
Yeah, it looks like they're setting it up. You kind of broke it down pretty well. It looks like they're setting it up almost as like a
smorgasbord.
Yeah, and it could be a nice flow. The big issue or the big question mark is how Koscheck Hendricks looks. That could be a fight that goes 2.5 minutes and someone gets knocked the fuck out, or it could be two guys that kind of wrestle with each other.
I think they're having faith in Hendricks there to make that fight not stink. We haven't really seen a stinky Hendricks fight other than, I want to say, the Pierce fight, but Pierce kind of does that to everybody.
Yeah. But, I mean, 3 of those 4 fights are, you don't want to say they're guaranteed to be barn burners, but they're likely to be pretty good, exciting fights. But yeah, it's an interesting format that they're going to follow. You said earlier that that Anderson Silva wouldn't draw on Fox. I really think if they put, and obviously they wouldn't for obvious reasons, but if they put the Silva Sonnen rematch on here on free TV, with the way that Chow can talk and the way that they would go and push that fight,
right?
I do think that would be good numbers.
Well, to bring in some pro wrestling, since fucking Roth isn't here, back in the day when WCW was desperate to beat WWF in the Monday Night Wars, they put like Hogan's championship fights on Monday night. And it won them the ratings battle. They got really good numbers, but they lost money doing it. So, that's silly.
Well, the big mistake that they made was when they started slipping in the ratings, and then they put the Goldberg-Hogan fight on Nitro.
Exactly. And that was their paper
title. And yeah, it was great for the ratings. It was great in the short term, but giving away a big money matchup like that,
it's just a big money matchup, like the big money matchup. Like
yeah.
The Silva Sonnen 2 fight is going to be the fight of 2012 as far as pay-per-view buys go. Unless Overeem comes back and does something crazy, which isn't going to fucking happen.
Right.
I mean, that might hit 1 million, and that'll probably be the only one that does that this year. So you're not going to put that on free TV, even if 10 million people watch it.
Yeah, and I think 1 million at this point is, it's possible, but I don't think it's as likely as it was a couple years ago.
I think it's more likely that it's in America instead of being a Brazil card, which for some reason any kind of foreign card just doesn't do the pay-per-view numbers that it should.
Right. And obviously it's that show is. Even with Bisping Boach, which we'll get to later, getting moved off, is still a very good card top to bottom. And the fact that it's the July 4th weekend show is always was always a big thing for them.
That was the 100 card. I mean, the 100 card hit 1.6 million, but it was also the New Year, the
July
4th of July card.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I do like one thing, just kind of getting off topic a little bit. I do like that the UFC does that, where they have the year-end show, the Super Bowl show, and the July 4th show. Like, it's their kind of unofficial Grand Slam events, or however.
Yeah.
I kind of like that they do that.
Right. I love stacking the New Year's Eve show. It just kind of, like, they're deeper now, so the Super Bowl show can be danker. But the Super Bowl show has kind of gotten buried the last couple of years. Like, it hasn't been, make a weekend of it. It's just, there's a UFC on before the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I think part of that, too, though, has been injuries and just...
Right, and it's also stacking the shit out of a card that's, like, at best 5 weeks before the Super Bowl.
Right. But yeah, I do love the July 4th shows. It's always fun, and it's, I don't know. It's just something about having that kind of schedule, and it always seems like things are kind of at random with UFC matchmaking, but I think there is a method behind the madness like that. So,
well, yeah, you do have to follow the flow of injuries, and also these guys have lives. Sometimes, it's my wife's going to have a kid next month. Like, I want to hang out at home for a few months and hang out with my infant. Like, all right, well, we'll put you at a fight, 7 months from now. That happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially guys that can afford it, which happen to be the guys that you want to see on the headlining cards.
Right. So yeah, Roth is up in New Jersey right now, covering this, which is why he's not here. Is there anything else on the card that you specifically want to talk about, Derek?
Well, for this UFC card, I mean, the prelims, there's not a whole lot of divisional relevance there, but a Pablo Garza fight, you always have the opportunity to see either a submission or a knockout of the night. He's a very entertaining fighter. John Dodson is going to be going at it. They're doing flyweight fights, 2 of them actually, that are outside of the tournament, so they're trying to build up that division a little bit. So there's some things to keep an eye on down there.
Have they
And Carlos Vamola, who was a heavyweight and then came in at light heavyweight, is now going to be a middleweight versus Mike Vicencio. So that'll be one of the Facebook fights. It's worth tuning into.
And they haven't released a headliner for UFC on Fox 4 yet, right? I know they've been talking about some...
They're not going to do that before the Fox on 3 is done. Absolutely not.
Well, it actually seems kind of weird that they wouldn't. It seems like an obvious thing for them to do, to have a headliner, and they can promote that on this show. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about too, is I kind of saw this mentioned on Twitter a couple of times, but I haven't really seen any and part of this is the fact that the NFL isn't on right now, but I haven't really seen any big advertising push for this show on Fox, on their other sporting things. I watched. It was very.
You want to fucking enunciate this thought a little bit better, Mike?
Yeah. Well, for instance, I watched the White Sox game a couple weeks ago, where Phil Humber threw the perfect game. It was on Fox. It was a national TV game, and I didn't see any promotion for the UFC on Fox. Whereas the first show and the UFC on Fox in Chicago was just loaded on NFL shows with advertisements and in-game plugs and stuff like that. I don't know if that's maybe just me. I
don't think it's indicative of any kind of issue with the relationship. I think
I'm not saying that at all.
I think Fox acknowledges there's going to be a lot more crossover of NFL fans to UFC cards that are promoted by a silhouetted woman holding up a ring card than most baseball fans are.
Perhaps. I just wonder how, if obviously MMA fans are going to know where the fight is, but if Fox isn't going to make a big push with their casual sports audience, is that going to affect their numbers or even just long term, like how they're going to push the sport on the channel?
Well, I mean, everything that Dana has said is that, I wish this relationship with Fox was for 17 years instead of 7, that they are just as crazy and passionate about it as I am. They have ideas, but it's not like they're trying to steamroll us. They're just trying to make the product better. Everything that he said has been glowing, and we're not even a year into it. So I think it's a little early to start, analyzing the amount of commercial load from sport to sport. Watch them do it on NASCAR when they start showing that shit again. I bet that, it's audience specific. I don't think there's a lot of baseball fans that enjoy MMA. You're a weird fucking guy, Mike.
That's true. I mean, I just love all sports.
I know, and that's weird. Like, I
others.
was a team sports guy that got into MMA, and so were you. But a lot of these MMA fans are guys that fucking like don't watch anything else, or maybe they watch soccer and MMA. Like, they don't really get down with the big four of America like we do.
Yeah, which has always been a weird thing to me. I don't know. I don't understand.
You know why? It's because they're all a bunch of little pussies. They got their asses kicked and tried out for the football team, and they all weigh like 140 pounds. Like, look at this little dude. He kicked that big fat lineman's ass.
Oh, I've been missing a bunch of tweets during the show.
He's just saying that Stan Lombard was announced for the Fox 4 headliner, and I don't think that's true. I haven't seen that anywhere else.
I thought it was announced for the show. I don't think it's the main. I didn't hear that it was the main event. I thought when I read that it was signed that it was going to be on that UFC on Fox show, though.
Well, that's awesome. And good for Hector Lombard, man. I mean, beating up a bunch of tomato cans and cashing that in for a UFC on Fox spot against one of the most popular fighters, or at least known fighters on the roster.
Yeah, and we'll get into that right away. I have that on the list. It's a fight that we talked about last week. We were talking about who you match up Lombard with. We were talking either Stan or the winner of Paul Harris Belcher this weekend. I really, really like this fight. Of the guys in the top 10 in that division in the UFC, I think Stan is the guy that Lombard has the best shot of being. But I still favor Stan in the fight, and I still think, if Lombard gets past Stan, he's got a real, real big mountain to climb with the other guys in that division. Just, he's a guy. He's 34 years old already, and he's only 5 feet 9 inches tall. And everyone else in that division is at or above 6 feet, big dudes. And
well, not Paul Harris.
Well, Paul Harris, yeah, Paul Harris is the exception. I don't know if
Paul
Harris is in the top 10. I'm going to check right now. But yeah, I mean, how do you? I assume you're obviously in favor of the fight since we were all.
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, and the first thing I got to do, is kind of criticize a little bit the reaction to it that I saw. Which is, there were some people that were saying, awesome matchmaking, great fight, like, that's perfect. And then there were some people saying, man, look how easy Joe Silva's job is. Like, this is the easiest fucking fight in the world to make. And it's the same people that when they make a fight he don't like, they say, look at this fucking idiot, he should have done this. And if you're not going to give credit where it's due, then it's hard to be fair when you're detracting when you don't think it is. You got to give him credit for a good matchmaking, even if you think it's obvious. You got to say, well done, thumbs up.
Yeah.
And so I love the fight. Like you said, Lombard is 34. If he wins this fight, then he's right there fighting like a Bisping or a Belfort or somebody higher up than Stan next time out. If he loses, I don't think he could make it to 170. Like, there's pictures of him standing next to Mariusz Pudzianowski, like, trying to outswell him, and it's actually competitive. And Pudzianowski's, fucking former strongest man in the world, probably walks around about 280.
I actually wouldn't mind. I mean, this might not work in terms of timetables, but I actually wouldn't mind if Lombard beats Stan. Just then you put him in against Harris or Belcher, depending on who wins that fight. If this is going down in August, like they say, it might not work in terms of scheduling, but I wouldn't mind that. But yeah, I mean, you look at the top 10. It's Silva. We went through this last week, I think, but Silva, Sonnen, Munoz, Belfort, Bisping, Rockhold, Boch, Okami, Weidman, and Stan. And I think Stan's. I still stand by that Stan's probably the one guy that Lombard has the best shot of. All those other guys present a lot of problems for Hector Lombard. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does. I really think he's if he doesn't get embarrassed by Stan, I think one of those other guys is going to embarrass him. And I think the Hector Lombard experiment is going to die a pretty quick death in the UFC.
I am a complete agnostic when it comes to Lombard's possibilities in the UFC. Like, I don't even know if they exist, but I can't deny them because there's no evidence against them. I've never seen him get his ass kicked, but I've never seen him against anybody that's that good. I mean, Shlemenko is probably his best win. So, we'll see. And it's interesting. I'm just happy for him that he got out of that fucking dirtbag contract that was in Bellator. They said, we're not going to match. I hope that the same thing happens with Alvarez. And that Bellator keeps being a factory where their best fighters eventually make it.
Yeah, one thing there's a theory, or it might not even be a theory. It might be kind of factual, but you can always tell a good football team by not how they do against top teams, but how they do against the lower ranked teams. If you're consistently beating the bottom of the barrel teams and kind of doing it in impressive fashion, there's a good chance that you're a pretty good football team.
Well, you don't want to play down to your competition,
right? But I mean,
like
the idea is that when you're playing against other top elite teams, there's a lot of variance in terms of who ends up winning and losing a game. So I think it's fair to say that Lombard is probably a pretty good fighter, probably top 15, top 20 easily. But like you said, we haven't really seen him fight anyone in that, even in the top 20, 25 since Gegard Mousasi in 2006, when both guys were kind of up and coming, and he lost that fight. So I have my skepticism about him. I think if he does beat Stan, if he is successful in the UFC, it won't necessarily shock me. But I think the competition he's about to face is another world over what he's faced since.
Well, it absolutely is. But you've got a short, stocky frame that knows judo, which is actually perfect for how short and stocky he is. So he's got somewhat of a grappling background, world-ending power, and aggressiveness. If you add those three things in, he's at least dangerous against a guy like Stan. Stan can put him on his ass. We've never really seen him get hit, but I think that Lombard hits hard enough where you at least have to give him that puncher's chance in a fight against a legit guy.
Yeah, and there's also a part of me too, and I should be totally transparent about this. That I've heard a lot of stories about Hector Lombard and the kind of stuff he pulls down at AT&T and just some really weird kind of stories about him. And I mean, there's a part of me just as a fan of the sport that wants to see him get his ass beat. From what I've heard about him, he just sounds like a really big dick that gets away with a lot. It gets away with a lot because the ATT guys have a lot of faith in him and his skills and where he can go. But again, he's 34 years old, so his window in terms of reaching, that pinnacle is closing, and it's going to close real fast in the next couple of years.
I've been saying the same thing about Anderson Silva for about 2 years now, but some of these sons of bitches just buck the trend.
Well, there's a difference between Anderson Silva and Hector Lombard, where Anderson's been beating top competition for a long, long time. And,
yes, but their similarity is they've both been beating their competition while taking relatively little damage. Lombard hasn't been in a lot of wars, and neither is Silva.
I mean, that's true. I mean, that's definitely an argument you can make.
I'm just saying, at 34, we don't start looking at NFL quarterbacks at 34 and say, wow, this guy's wheels are going to fall off the next couple of years. Fucking everybody's blowing us for signing Peyton Manning. He's going to be 36 and coming off of 4 neck surgeries. It's, people assume 38, 39 now is when you get out of the game.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about elite athletes, I mean, when you look at the general population of athlete, I mean,
I think Lombard is stacked. I think at the very least, Lombard is a physical specimen. If you see his workout vids and you see how swole he looks when he's fucking jacked up.
Yeah, and by physical specimen, you mean wink, physical specimen, right?
I don't know, man. I don't like to accuse people without evidence. I mean, he is in Cuba, so I think they're a little lax down there, but he signed a UFC contract. That means he had to pass a drug test. Isn't that awesome to know now?
Yeah. KJ Gould sent me a text or a tweet. Tweet. Lombard and Barnett had an hour-plus hard sparring session when at CSW with Eric Paulson following them mopping up blood. And I've heard a similar story. So I don't remember the details, which is why I don't want to repeat it. But, that's the kind of stuff that I've heard. Also stuff involving a baseball bat.
Vandalay is still fighting.
And then another tweet from King Silo 24. Stan versus Lombard, Machida versus Bader, Lozon versus Edom, Brown versus Rothwell on Fox 4. Which is interesting.
Where are you getting this shit from? Send us links and tag me in this shit.
I'm pretty sure Machida Bader is also a go. The other two fights I haven't heard, but the reason I'm kind of surprised is that Wikipedia doesn't have that card up at all yet, which is usually.
And if Wikipedia doesn't have it, it's not real.
Exactly. We'll move on. There was a show. I don't remember if it was Friday or Saturday last weekend. The Invicta show with the ladies fighting. I only watched the last 2 fights. I was out doing stuff. I think it was at a baseball game or something. So I only caught the last two fights. Fairly entertaining, I guess. Did you watch the show, Derek? Were you watching it, or did you catch results at all? Did you care?
No, I cared and I caught results. I'm rooting for it, but this stupid bullshit controversy over the numbers, it did well. Like it drew a lot of people. There was a lot of coverage of it on the Twitter sphere, so there were at least a lot of people streaming it. I mean, if you give MMA fans shit for free, they'll fucking take it.
Yeah, but the number that they released was something like 250,000 in that ballpark, and
okay, that's probably not true.
yeah, I immediately kind of called bullshit, and it sounds like a lot of other people have also done the same thing.
I don't care if they get two people to report it as fact, and that makes other people perk their ears up a little bit. Fuck it, lie to the media. That's great.
Yeah, I don't. You know, promoters what a promoter does. I mean, the WWF has for years said that 93,000 people packed the Pontiac Silverdome for WrestleMania 3, and I think there hasn't. I don't know if there's been conclusive evidence, but it's been talked about in wrestling circles for a long time that the number is probably more around 80,000, 85,000. But yeah, I mean, it's a promoter's job to kind of inflate and make themselves look as good as possible. It just, I mean, 250,000 is more than most of the UFC Facebook events get, and that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's probably a little inflated, but I mean, you're a first time promoter. Like, there's no way to verify these numbers. That's what I love about the media, because they take these numbers all the time, whether it be from Meltzer or anyone else, and it's reported as gospel when nobody actually knows the fucking numbers. So when you hear one you don't believe, it's instantly bullshit. But when you hear one that kind of confirms what you already knew, you go with it and you report it as fact. That's called confirmation bias, guys.
Well, I mean, Meltzer's a guy who's, he's got sources in the pay-per-view industry. He's someone that I think has built up a reputation as being a reliable source.
But there's no way to verify like any of it. We trust Meltzer because we trust Meltzer, but it's not like we put his numbers up against the actual numbers and saw how close they were. There are no actual fucking numbers.
Well, and I think the thing with Meltzer, though, is that, if he's not a reliable source, if he's wildly off on pay-per-view numbers, I think companies like the UFC and the WWF are going to. I mean, the WWF has to report their numbers at this point because they're a publicly traded company. But if he was wildly off, the UFC I think would be a little more forward with their numbers, especially if they were doing better than what Meltzer was saying. So, like I said, I think Dave's built up a reputation at this point for doing this for so long that maybe it's not fair or not responsible to take his numbers as gospel, but. I think it's a general barometer of how a show did. I think he's a fair.
Well, even barring Meltzer, you'll hear pay-per-view numbers leak before the Wrestling Observer comes out. Like, there'll be something he'll come out and correct the numbers and it'll be close to what was leaked before. But there's always something that's reported before even he gets out there. And like I said, it's if you think the number is legit, you report it, and if you don't, you say, oh, they're lying. Like, what? That's not fucking journalism. That's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, to me the Invicta numbers are just it didn't sound right when I heard them. I
hope they lie. I hope they say the next one gets 300,000. I hope they keep lying. Good for you, Invicta.
I do want to just on a note about Invicta. I believe the promoter's name is Samantha Knapp, and
APP.
Is it Samantha? Is that right?
I have no idea.
Oh, Shannon Knapp. It's Shannon Knapp, but her Twitter handle is Shan Knapp, and it always looks like Shark Knapp to me. And I don't know why I felt the need to say that on the show.
All right, moving on.
Moving on. We're running out of topics already, Derek. I'll be honest.
Dude, we have a pile of topics here. What are you talking about? You wanted to talk about Mayweather Cotto, which I don't.
Really yes. Understand. Well, there's not really much to talk about. I'm actually probably going to. I will miss the show. I will be watching The Avengers this weekend, which has already made a retarded amount of money internationally. So you have no interest in Mayweather Cotto this weekend at all?
I have no interest in the Avengers either. Like, we are just talking about things about which I do not give a shit. Is that a movie?
Are you serious?
Dude, who's in it?
Wait, what?
Who's it?
You know what the Avengers is, right?
I've heard. I know there's the Hulk's in it, and Captain America, and who else?
Iron Man.
Really?
My roommate's overhearing our conversation. He's not happy with you, Derek.
Be angry all day. I ain't fucking. We can roll right now. I need some practice.
I just don't understand how you don't know what.
Work on my collar jokes.
Like, do you watch television at all, or like go out of your house? Like the Avengers is everywhere.
Not in my fucking collection call center job that I lost on May 1st. Not in the fucking UCCS parking lot, which I don't have access to, so I got to park and then walk to campus like a half a mile. I'm not familiar with the movie. Like, I think.
Are you aware that there's a third Batman movie coming out this summer?
Yes. I loved The Dark Knight. That was a really good movie. Heath Ledger had an awesome performance in it. That was a good movie. So I'm interested in the third one. I'm sure it goes over the fucking top. I see one where I saw a picture where they like imploded a fucking football field that I think Heinz Ward was standing on.
Were you aware of Batman before those movies came out?
Yes, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. I had a fleeting association with comic books as a young child. And then right around that time is when like Batman movies came out with Arnold Schwarzenegger as fucking Mr. Freeze, and the Batman and Robin movie with Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl, and then the Spider-Man movies, and I don't watch Hollywood interpretations of comic books anymore. I just don't.
Man, this is nuts. So
they suck. Did you like the Spider-Man movies?
I did not like the Spider-Man movies.
Okay, well, those were like the big blockbuster. And then fucking like, okay, what other childhood thing of mine that I liked would I like to see raped by Hollywood when I'm in my fucking mid to late teens?
I don't know. What would you like to see raped?
Trying to think. I had an answer, but I'm totally not gonna say it on air. I'm not gonna do it. Yay for self-censorship.
I mean, the thing though is like, even if you're not interested in comic books and the Avengers, like, it's such a big movie right now.
It's a cultural event, man.
It's not a cultural event. It's everywhere.
I really miss it. Like, I live in Colorado Springs. I drive to Denver. I go to and from school. I go to and from work. Sometimes I go to the bar. They don't have posters up.
Like, Denver doesn't have billboards? Because there's billboards for the Avengers everywhere in Chicago.
If there was a billboard for a movie in Denver, I'd find whoever bought it and punch him in the face. You need to put up like a plumbing company or something. Put up something up there that matters.
So, are you aware of Robert Downey Jr.? Do you know who he is?
Yeah, I watched Iron Man 1 and 2.
He's in it.
Yeah, I did not know that. The second one kind of sucked compared to the first one. It was more just, hey, look, we made a sequel and it's glitzier and glamourier.
Yeah, I agree. The second one was a bit of a letdown.
So, I probably won't even bother to see number 3. The fact that he's in the Avengers is cool, but that means that it's like Robert Downey Jr. in like a bit role, and fuck that.
What?
I'd rather see him lead, man. Fuck out of here. Robert
Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Captain America, Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk.
Who is Captain America?
Chris Evans.
Who the fuck is Chris Evans?
I don't know what. He was Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four, apparently.
Is your roommate just scoffing at me in the background?
He was also in Scott Pilgrim.
Versus the World. Yeah, I tragically missed that one.
Yeah. Also, so I'll keep going down this list. Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, Jeremy Renner. Maybe you've heard of Jeremy Renner.
Black Widow. I don't know that bitch's costume. Is it nice? Is it like?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Beckinsale is the only reason I watch the Underworld movies because of the whole lycra bodysuit thing.
Sam Jackson's in this movie as Nick Fury.
And who the fuck is Nick Fury?
Who the fuck is Nick Fury? Oh, you are.
Is that even a superhero?
You're an idiot.
Does he fly? What does he do?
I'm not even gonna bother explaining this to you.
Nick Fury. So he's not a doctor of anything.
No.
No formal training.
No, he's not Dr. Nick Fury. He's just Nick Fury.
He's just Nick Fury, not Mr. Fury.
He's the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. Come on.
S.H.I.E.L.D. What is? Goddamn. All right, can we talk about MMA now? God,
no, we're gonna talk boxing.
All right, fine.
So your lack of interest in Mayweather Cotto, is that because of the lack of competitive or the perceived lack of competitive nature in the bout, or is it you just don't care about Floyd Mayweather, or what's your explanation for this?
I want to see Floyd Mayweather fight Manny Pacquiao. And I want to see Manny Pacquiao. I'm actually less interested in seeing Manny Pacquiao fight Floyd Mayweather now, because now I think Floyd wins that fight after what Marquez did to him. Marquez won that fight if you watched it. And after that, and the fact that it's just going on and on and on, and they still won't do it, it's the only relevant opponent that I see out there for Floyd. Otherwise, like when he retired, nobody really cared. And if he comes back to fight somebody other than Pacquiao, nobody really cares. Pacquiao has lost a lot of luster to me after Marquez fight. So I think that by waiting too long, and this was always criticism of Zuffa, waiting too long to make big fights and just letting people lose in the interim, like with Vanderlei versus Chuck, they didn't do that immediately. It doesn't really tickle my pickle anymore.
So let me ask you this, Derek. Let's transport ourselves back to August 1st, 2010. And we're doing a podcast, and I'm telling you, I don't care about Anderson Silva fights until he fights George St. Pierre.
Well, you're stupid.
This is going into the Chael Sonnen fight, the fight that no one thought Chael Sonnen had a chance in. If I told you, thank you for that. If I told
That's
you,
my response.
If I told you I had no interest in watching Anderson Silva fight until he fought George St. Pierre, your response is
that George St. Pierre has never fought above 170 pounds, and Anderson Silva hasn't fought at 170 in years, and it's a stupid fight for George St. Pierre to take because he'd be really outsized. That's not the case with Pacquiao versus Mayweather. Not even close. Those guys have fought across weight classes for years. They've moved up, and they've moved up, and they've moved up.
But the point I'm trying to get at here is that I don't think it's fair to say, well, these guys aren't fighting each other, so I don't care about any other fight that they're in. Cotto's still a top guy.
What, top 4? No. Top 6?
Nah, you're gonna make me go check boxing rankings now.
Well, yeah, which one? The fucking 90 boxing rankings that are out there.
I'm going to boxrec.com.
Okay, so we're going to go independent here, not the Ring, which has been compromised lately.
God, so many weight classes.
Yeah. So what? He'll probably be 8th in one. Where's this fight taking place at?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, because nobody cares. Because it's Floyd Mayweather versus Miguel Cotto. Isn't this like the second time?
BoxRec.com has Miguel Cotto as the #1 light middleweight in the world.
Really? So does Floyd Mayweather not fight at that weight class, or is he coming up to take his belt?
Floyd Mayweather is moving up to take this fight.
How much?
I think light middleweight is 154. So he usually fights at 147 right now. So he's coming up a weight class, like a champ.
Like a champ.
Team money.
Why don't you talk? Are you saying that George St. Pierre is not a champ because he won't move up in weight?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. It's obviously different in boxing because there's an easier gradual move up.
That's cool. Miguel Cotto got TKO'd by Manny Pacquiao in 2009. I'd rather see Floyd Mayweather fight the guy that beat Miguel Cotto than Miguel Cotto, seeing as how he's the undefeated best in the world.
I'd rather see that fight too, but I don't think that that makes Mayweather Cotto totally or uninteresting.
Well, if Floyd beats Miguel, hooray! Like who fucking read? Like it doesn't do it for me. And they don't really care about fighting for legacy or anything like that. They want to fight for money, which means they want to get people like me that normally don't give a shit to buy the card. There's only one way to do that, Floyd. You got to fight Manny.
Yeah, that's. Like I said, I agree. I want to see that fight too, but
I am a casual boxing fan. I'm the definition of. I watched Hopkins Dawson the other night. I watched the whole thing.
I'm surprised you did that.
I was surprised too. Like right around the 9th, because it was like watching it was sad. Mir and Max Kellerman say, in 19 years, I haven't scored a fight against Bernard Hopkins, even the Taylor fights, and I'm scoring this one against him tonight. It was just sad. He couldn't get off.
So many ways I could go with that. The thing about Mayweather Cotto is that because I'm not going to it, or I'm not watching it, I'm going to see the Avengers that night. There's a part of me that's really worried that Mayweather's going to look really flat and lose the fight, and I'm going to miss that. You know, there's a fun atmosphere at that when there's a big upset like that, and I think there's a part of me that my head's telling me Mayweather's a huge favorite for a reason. He should win this fight going away, but there's a part of me that's like it's same way with the last Pacquiao Marquez fight where
you're literally watching this movie like during the main event.
Right,
like
exactly.
It's a 45-minute long fight, and you're watching, and that's going to be within the 2 hours of this fucking movie.
Yeah, well, the movie's at 11, and I'm going to. I mean, obviously, I'll be traveling to get to the theater, and then I won't be out of the movie until after 1 in the morning. So, I mean, the fight will be long done by the time I get out of the movie.
Oh, whatever shall you? Well, it's a shame they're only showing that movie for one fucking night. That seems counterproductive.
Well, these plans have been in place for a while, and
your roommate's going to be super pissed if you don't go, Mike.
Yeah, he's going to be super mad. I mean, whatever.
Super.
Basically, yeah. My roommate.
I gotta laugh. All right, I'll take it. Fuck.
Basically, like I agree. Like this fight isn't big enough for me to ditch out other plans to go watch, but I'm still interested in it.
Okay, would you ditch out for Pacquiao Mayweather?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it also depends.
There you go.
I mean, for a
That's
movie,
the difference. Yeah, that's the difference between you like normally watching it and not canceling plans, and me not watching it and watching it.
Well, that's fair enough.
I'm explaining that to you, but you need to drop the fucking Anderson Silva George St. Pierre thing, man. It's never gonna happen. I tell Ryan from
No.
It's never gonna happen.
I've lost all faith and hope in that.
You brought it up like a month ago because they were like, "Hey, they talked about it again." Yeah, and your nipples got a little hard. It's not gonna happen, man.
That's not true,
Mark.
That's not true. I've lost all faith in that fight happening. I just like to bring it up because the idea that the UFC always puts on the big fight, it's not true. And
we give the fans what they want.
There are incentives for the UFC not to put on a big fight sometimes.
You wanted it, you got it, Mike. Fans wanted Diaz St. Pierre before. If George St. Pierre had fought Anderson Silva after that, they would have said he was ducking Diaz. They're never fucking happy.
No, they would not. There's no one that would say.
Absolutely, 100%. There was
no one that would say George St. Pierre is ducking Nick Diaz.
There was someone out there saying that Junior Seau killing himself had something to do with MMA. The people will say anything. Whatever the counter argument is to what is actually happening, somebody will say. That's the fucking state of MMA media right
now. Jason Amati is asking me on Twitter, you're not going to watch UFC on Fox 3 or Mayweather Cotto? I will be watching the UFC on Fox 3, and then after that, I will be immediately leaving my house to go to the movie theater to watch The Avengers. Thanks to Rami at Fight Metric, who roped me into doing work that night. I will be forced to watch UFC on Fox 3. Nothing to say to that, Derek?
No. Like, that sounds like a fun plan. Tell me how the movie was. Maybe I'll torrent it, but.
Well, I'm not going to
Chris
tell you.
Evans, who? Nick Fury. It's all new to me.
Like, you've never read a comic book in your life, have you?
No, I read some comic books, but I don't think that S.H.I.E.L.D. was in all of them.
S.H.I.E.L.D.'s in like every Marvel comic. Every major Marvel comic, Nick Fury shows up at some point.
Did he show up in X-Men?
Probably at some point.
I don't remember him. I was more of an X-Men guy when I was a kid.
Oh, that's fair. I love X-Men too. You alluded to this earlier. Bisping Boach getting moved off of UFC 148. The reason I bring it up is because last week you and Mr. Roth were a little aghast that I was not quick to jump on board the idea that UFC 148 was the best card ever on paper. So with that fight getting moved off, do you still hold that notion to be true, or are you a little less excited about it? I mean, obviously it's still a great card.
It's still a great card, but like I said, I didn't have it number one before that fight moved off. It does remove the number one contender from it. There's a lot of divisional relevance gone, but Maia versus Kim, whoever wins that is in line for a contender fight. Griffin Ortiz still has kind of the legacy historical value to it, and Rich Franklin's still going to beat the shit out of Kung Lee, so I'm still going to watch.
Yeah, that was never the issue, though. I mean, we all agreed that it was a great card. It's still a great card. It's just
it's just less great than before.
Yeah, but is it the greatest card of all time on paper?
It wasn't before this, Mike.
I thought that's what you and Roth were bitching at me about last week.
It's
because I didn't come out and say that I had my my reservations about immediately calling this the best card on paper.
Well, who did? I didn't.
Well, then Roth, maybe I misinterpreted what you were saying, because Roth was telling me that I was an idiot.
Well, I got to re-listen to the show. Like, God damn it. I mean, my memory may not be what it was, but I don't think I put it number one of all time ever before that. I'm kind of pissed that Bisping versus Boch is going to go to fucking Calgary as opposed to fall into the UFC 150 card in Denver that I will sell plasma in order to go to now that I'm unemployed.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about why you're unemployed, Derek.
I don't want to talk about why I'm unemployed.
You've brought it up twice now. You specifically referenced it twice.
It is what it is. That doesn't mean that you want to describe this. You can talk about, like, yeah, my wife left me. It's like, well, tell me about it. Nah, I don't want to fucking talk about it. I'm just letting you know.
Your wife left you?
I don't have a wife. I never have. Nobody's ever even, applied for the gig.
So yeah, it's still obviously a great card. I still think the Franklin Lee and Griffin Ortiz fights are whatever. There's part of me that likes Franklin Lee just because Kung Lee's going to get the snot kicked out of him. But
let's do a little bit of fantasy matchmaking for me here. UFC 150, Pepsi Center in Denver. Henderson Edgar's a headliner. Ed Herman welcoming Jake Shields back to middleweight. I hope he wins. Okami versus Luis Kane making his middleweight debut. Hallman versus Tavares. Those are the only announced fights. What else do you think they're going to throw on this card to round it
out? I honestly have no clue. It's always hard to, especially when there's so many fights confirmed before and after this. It's always hard for me to kind of picture who's even available at this time.
Well, you have to think whoever wins the Fox headliner. If Diaz wins, he's probably in line for a title shot, so he's not going to be on that card. Miller, maybe, if he wins, because it sounds like he's going to have to win another fight or two. But, I mean, do you have him fight Maynard on that card because it's he busy?
Bader?
No, Maynard.
Maynard?
Yeah, he's fighting June 22nd. That'd be a really short turnaround for him.
Yeah. Well, that's another issue going back to the Fox card is, is it, obviously the UFC announcing title shot opportunities before fights is never proven to be totally reliable, but is it fair that Diaz gets a title shot and Miller doesn't?
No, number one contender fights like that are never fair, and it sounds like they're going to do that. There was another fight, too, where they said it was Diaz, Miller, and what was the other one? They said there were two fights that they said if one guy wins, he'll get a title shot. If the other guy, not so much. And I've always disliked that. If I'm good enough to beat the guy, then if he beats me, he gets a shot. I should be able to get a shot.
Yeah, and I agree. I also think I actually think Jim Miller is more qualified to get a title shot than Nate Diaz is.
Well, at 155, probably. It's just, Diaz beating Cerrone, he got a really big push after that. It was he shattered the record for strikes landed in a fight. It was a really good performance for him in front of a lot of people. So they want to give him that push, and I don't know. Maybe they're doing that to keep Nick happy.
It's just, possibly. It's just, you look at Nate's record. I mean, at 155, he has losses to Guida, Stevenson, Maynard. He has wins over Gallard, Gomi, Cerrone. I mean, not a terrible record by any means.
No, but 3-3, and I'd like to see him avenge one of those losses. Like, have him fight Maynard again, have him fight Guida.
Right, and I mean, you look at Jim Miller. He's got wins over Gallard, Chaloris, Oliveira, Tebow, Bocek, Ludwig, Lopez, Danzig, Wyman, and then Barron in the UFC. His losses are to Ben Henderson and Gray Maynard, who is one's the champion and one's the number 3 guy in the division. So, I mean, the idea that Jim Miller needs another win after Nate Diaz to deserve a title shot just is completely bizarre to me.
It would be really fair to have Gray Maynard as just that kind of a wall. Like, you must be this tall to fucking ride the title shot express, and if you can't beat Gray Maynard, then that sucks. Like, if Frankie loses to Benson, I'm sure he doesn't want to fight Gray again, but that fight certainly makes sense to see who challenges Benson later. And anybody that wants to fight Frankie, if he beats Benson, I don't think they'll want to make a trilogy there, even though they'll probably kind of have to for competitive balance. Like, with that top 3 at light heavyweight, I feel like you kind of have to crack it in order to get in. Otherwise, you're jumping ahead of a spot in line.
Right. And the thing is, here's the other thing, and this kind of alludes back to what I was talking about earlier. The only other loss Jim Miller has in his career, his sixth professional fight in New Jersey, it was a loss to Frankie Edgar. So in his career, Jim Miller has lost to Ben Henderson, Gray Maynard, and Frankie Edgar. He's beaten everybody else. Even though he hasn't beaten those guys, it's not unfair to say, and all those fights too, by the way, were decision losses. So I don't think it's unfair to say that Jim Miller is one of the elite guys at 155.
And this is also why I still rank Sean Shirk at lightweight, because other than George St. Pierre, Frankie Edgar, and BJ Penn, he's beaten everybody else.
Except Evan Dunham.
He beat Evan Dunham. He won the first two.
No, that's one of
He won the second round. He hit the Sex Panther escape every time. For 60% of the time, it works every time.
I often agree with your interpretation of fights and your love of wrestling and MMA, but that fight, I just don't.
Everybody just remembers the last minute where Evan Dunham is piecing him up, but Sean Shirk wins the first 3.5, 4 minutes of that round, and he doesn't get dropped.
I don't know. I like to rewatch that fight, but I remember being pretty staunch in my stance that Evan Dunham won that fight.
Well, he did win the hell out of the third round, but I think Shirk won the first. The second is debatable. You're not crazy if you think Dunham won that fight, but I have it for sure.
I'm just going to say that Eric, our producer, is chiming in that Evan Dunham did win that fight and that you, Derek, are crazy.
Yeah, well, I've heard worse.
Moving on, and another fight that's announced, or Dana White has unofficially announced it. Mauricio Shogun Rua will fight Thiago Silva at some point. I was thinking about Shogun earlier, and I was also looking at a baseball reference page for what's his? Oh, this is going to be embarrassing now that I don't remember his name.
Clickety clack, clack, clickety clack.
Clickety
fill this dead hair.
Clack, clack.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Carlos Beltran.
Carlos
Beltran's had a couple of bad knee injuries, but he's still maintained a very high level of production when he's healthy and when he's playing super well this year. The St. Louis Cardinals kind of, in a way, traded Albert Pujols for Carlos Beltran, and so far, at least for this year, it's working out for them.
Yeah, what is it, May 3rd?
Yeah, well, exactly. But I mean, even if you look back last year, what he did for the Mets and the Giants, he had a really good year. It's fair to think that he'll at least keep pace here in 2012. But the point being is that Shogun's had these pretty bad knee injuries and these setbacks in his career, and I'm wondering if he's a guy that just on talent alone is still going to be a guy that can hang in that top five, maybe not beat those guys in the top five as consistently as he could have 4 or 5 years ago. But is he still just on talent alone, even without the physical attributes he may have had 5 or 6 years ago? Is he still a guy that can maintain that level?
Well, that's a good question. I'm under the impression that he was healthy for both the Jones fight and the Henderson fight. Jones is clearly on another level. And the last time I saw Shogun, he was beating the life out of Dan Henderson in the 5th round. So he survived Dan Henderson's right hand, which very few people ever have. He ate really hard shots. His cardio looked okay. I think his knees are holding up now. I haven't heard of any issues related to that. And people, there were a couple people on Twitter that when they announced Thiago Silva versus Shogun, that they thought that Shogun was going to lose, and I thought, you're fucking nuts. I'm going to bet the hell out of Shogun if that line's even close. I think Shogun's going to destroy Thiago Silva because I watched him not be able to finish a Gas Rashad Evans in the 3rd, and this is a 5-round fight.
And Thiago Silva is also a guy who's had his own injury problems himself.
And his own fake urine problems.
Exactly. I mean, even though that wasn't an injury, I mean, taking that year off isn't great for your career. Sometimes it helps in the long run in terms of,
Well, plus it means that one of his most impressive performances ever, which was against Brandon Vera playing the bongos on his ass, he was cheating before that fight, either by doing what he said, taking a shot for his shoulder that included some steroids, or he was doing something else. In either event, he pulled the Randleman, which you can't do, and this is a little message for anybody out there like me who's looking for a job. You can use the fake piss that they sell at head shops in order to pass your drug test for a job because they don't test for hormones. It's unisex urine. It passes the gravity test. It has everything in the correct proportions. They don't test for hormones. If you go to an athletic commission, they're specifically concerned with the amount of testosterone in your urine, so they test for hormones. If you give them unisex zombie piss, they're going to know it didn't come from a person.
Looking at Thiago Silva's fight record, even if you disregard the no contest in the Vera fight, if you assume that's a win, you have a pretty interesting case to make whether that or the Keith Jardine fight is his best win.
Knocking out Keith Jardine with a left hook is not the most impressive thing.
Exactly. If you look at the rest of his career in terms of wins, he beat Antonio Mendez at UFC 84, Houston Alexander, which is kind of the fight that probably put him on the map, UFC 78, Tomas Javal at UFC 75, and then James Irvin at UFC 71. So he hasn't beat any elite guys. He has fought them. He lost to Lyoto Machida, he lost to Rashad Evans, and then he lost to, obviously, Alexander Gustafsson.
And the Rashad fight actually kind of upped his stock, if you'll remember, because that was at that cursed UFC 108 card, which actually turned out to be a really entertaining card if you watched it. And the headlining fight, Rashad looked really good for the first 2 rounds, held him down, but he gassed like hell in the third to the point where Silva was making fun of him in between landing shots. But Silva was so gassed that he couldn't finish it. So Rashad ended up winning a unanimous decision.
Yeah, that was one of the most interesting third rounds. Silva had Rashad on the proverbial ropes, and he just sort of it was kind of like when Heath Herring landed that high kick on Nogueira, where he landed it, and it seems like he probably could have finished it if he really wanted to, or if he had the energy to.
Well, that was a little bit. I give Herring a little more credit for that, because Herring still made the wrong mistake, but he saw Nogueira on his back and went to dive in and went, oh wait, maybe this isn't the best idea in the world. Make him get up. I don't want to play the ground game with Nogueira. Fucking Silva just said, I have enough energy to dance and play to the judges, but I don't have enough energy to finish this guy. It was a much more dramatic example of like McCall versus Johnson in the last 20 seconds or so.
My response to that, though, is if Herring lands that kick in the first minute or two, because people don't remember that for the first 4 minutes and 40 seconds of that round, Herring got his ass beat. Nogueira took it to him for 4 minutes. If Herring was in a totally clear state of mind earlier in the fight, would he have recognized that Nogueira was hurt, and would he have followed up? I think that's an interesting question.
I'm pretty sure that entire training camp was, we're going to stand with Nogueira. If he falls down, we're just going to walk away.
Oh, yeah, and there's also the idea that if you knock him down earlier in the fight, you can afford to let him up and continue to punish him on his feet.
Yeah, and if you dive on him with 15 seconds left, there's less of a chance of getting caught. But
exactly.
I think the game plan was don't fucking get on the ground with Nogueira.
That's true. But yeah, it's really interesting for me to hear that people, especially after Shogun looked, relatively good against Dan Henderson, and obviously against Forrest Griffin, he made short work of Forrest. Although I had my concerns of the Forrest fight in terms of how his footwork looked. But it is interesting after his performances lately that people are still kind of doubting him against a guy like Thiago Silva, who has kind of had an inflated value in the MMA world because of kind of the timing of some of his wins.
That's all right. Well, if he loses this fight, we'll just start sticking him on those British cards that nobody cares about. Speaking of the UK, want to thank our sponsor, MMAmount.com this week. Really, actually, a cool-looking blog. Now that I'm taking a look at it, I'm going to browse here a little bit more. But we're getting some good Twitter feedback today. I think we have them to thank for that. So, keep selling us, even though it's like, 11 o'clock at fucking night over there? You guys are hardcore.
Our buddy, the other JD on Twitter, tweeting, quoting me, I was thinking about Shogun earlier, ... long, awkward, sexually frustrated pause. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I need a tweet of the week this week. I haven't had one yet. I mean, I guess we could make fun of Zach Arnold with the tweet of the week, but fuck that. I let it be funny, not stupid.
Since it's the last thing on our list, and since you had a pretty big blow up at the collective MMA media yesterday,
it was only really the one guy. There's nobody else I can blame for it.
Well, go ahead and tell your side of it.
Okay, so yesterday there was a tragedy in San Diego. Junior Seau, 43-year-old father, killed himself by shooting himself in the chest, and didn't leave a Dear Roger Goodell suicide note, didn't tell his wife and kids anything other than that he loved them the day before via text. And for some reason, Zach Arnold of Fight Opinion decided to tweet a link to other retired players talking about head injuries and the possibility that that has a link to Junior Seau's suicide. And then saying, it's hard to read this and not think about the consequences for MMA. And my initial response was, "Oh, shut the fuck up." And that turned into this big conversation in which a number of people assigned blame to themselves for enjoying football and watching it on TV for Junior Seau's death. And it's such a presumptuous, arrogant statement. You don't know why a man takes his own life. There are a number of reasons for somebody to shoot themselves in the chest. This isn't any kind of defense of the NFL. It should absolutely be investigated. There should be an autopsy. We should find out what the level of brain damage was and what the condition of his brain is and how it relates to his playing career. And it seems like almost the Chargers tried to do him a favor. They cut him a couple of years before he actually retired, and then he went and played with the Patriots for a couple more. So it's hard to say. I like what the UFC is doing now as far as fighter safety goes because it's better than the NFL. You have independent physicians. You have long medical suspensions. You have, short duration of fights. You have no contact orders for when people aren't, actively allowed to go in and train and bang. It's a nice situation, but you don't know why Junior Seau ended his own life, you arrogant pricks.
That's your piece?
That is my piece, and that is the piece that I spoke yesterday. And every time I do that, I think that fucking people are going to stop following me. But like if somebody jams up my Twitter feed that bad, normally I let them go. But people seem to stick around for me losing my mind.
Yeah, my thing is, I posted about this earlier, and this is just in general related to the NFL. And there's a lot of reaction yesterday in terms of concussions and CTE, and I saw a lot of people say that they're going to stop watching football, which if they take this issue seriously, I think that's the right course of action. But I've also seen a lot of people that saying we need to get concussions, we need to get CTE out of the game. The problem is that these guys are 200 and 300 pound men smashing into each other. I mean, you can make all the rule changes you want, unless you want to totally change how the game is played. Concussions and the after effects of them are going to be a part of the game. So unless
there are a number of proposals that you can make for the NFL to heighten the awareness of the players and to heighten the diagnosis of concussions quickly and independently. If you ever seen Any Given Sunday, you don't want a guy like James Woods, letting fucking players go for a bonus, even though, telling him I'll shake like a coconut on a goddamn tree for the rest of my life. I just need this bonus. I'm going to give it to my kids. You don't want that situation, somebody that's employed by the team making that decision. That's the way it is right now in the NFL. The UFC is leagues beyond that in terms of diagnosis and prevention of concussions because it's out of their hands. These guys have to be cleared before and after fights by physicians that aren't on the UFC payroll.
Yeah, and so unless if you as long as there's a money in the game and as long as there's money in putting yourself on the line like that, there's going to be guys that are willing to do it, and especially when you compensate them to the extent that professional athletes are. Like I said, unless you want to completely change the nature of the game or just outlaw it altogether, it's just going to be an issue. It's just a matter of making the game as safe as possible and treating guys as well as they can when they do get hurt or concussed. But in terms of completely eliminating that from the game, it's impossible with the way they.
It's an inherent risk, and you try to minimize it, and you do it with equipment. You do it, like you said, with rule changes. You're not allowed to hit somebody helmet to helmet. They really come down on you hard on that when it's blatant and obvious. They're doing things in order to try to mitigate it, and they're going to do more and more now that these lawsuits are coming. Hopefully, we don't need to see that in the case with the fighters, but I think that in the absence of a union, we didn't get a chance to talk about the California bill this week. We're going to do it next week because it actually deserves some time. But in the absence of government regulation, all you really have is the private sector and corporations trying to prevent themselves from litigation. But the UFC is kind of a hybrid because a lot of their fighter safety, the drug testing, the clearance before and after fight, the allowing somebody to even apply for a license to fight in the state, that's all beyond their control and already run by the government. So they're already leagues beyond regulation versus the NFL in that respect.
Yeah, Derek's mentioned the California bill. We were going to get to that this week, but ran out of time somehow. There are a couple of things before we end the show here I just want to mention that I saw on my Google Reader feed. The first two fights on the UFC on Fox card on Saturday will be on Facebook, which is always great. And then I just saw on Bloody Elbow this piece that Nick Diaz will be donating his entire Jiu-Jitsu super fight purse with Braulio Estima to charity. So Good on Nick for that. Anything else you want to say, Derek, before we get out of here?
I really wish I had a tweet of the week. I dropped the ball this week on that. I apologize to everyone.
Now that you're unemployed,
oh yeah, no, we're gonna have like a fucking ranking system for this shit now. I'll have a full dossier next week. I got nothing but time on my hands. Well, other than finals.
With that said, for Derek and myself, thank you for tuning in. Can I get an amen?
Yo, fuck calculus.